Hey YouTube, Alex here, and in today's video I wanted to talk a bit about inflation in other countries. I did a video recently on inflation in the US. Of course, a lot of us are noticing things are getting a lot more expensive here in the US. But I wanted to bring up the idea of inflation in other countries because I think some of you may be less familiar with the differences. So the main thing is that inflation can be quite a bit higher, typically speaking, in developing countries. I'm not exactly sure about the factors that cause that, but I've heard this is definitely the case from expats in, say, the Philippines and, say, Thailand, that things just seem to get more expensive more quickly over there. Even though they're starting from a lower base price, it's still certainly noticeable. I follow the Philippines Info channel, and I think his name is Steve, mentioned that he has noticed in the last year things increasing by 5 or 10%. Maybe something that used to be 50 pesos is now like 55 pesos or 60 Philippine pesos. And that certainly will make it more challenging. You have to kind of think about that when you're thinking, okay, I want to live in this country for 10 years. Well, you're going to need to make more money, say 5 to 10 years from now than you are right now if you want to keep up your standard of living. You may feel like, well, I can make the same amount I'm making now and it'll be fine, it's so cheap. But 5 to 10 years from now, your rent may be up by 20%. Your food costs may be up by 20%. Your transportation costs may have increased. Maybe you've got a girlfriend and you feel like it's gonna, whereas before maybe you would have walked or you would have taken public transit or something, maybe you feel like you need to spend more on cabs. It's not just the fact that there's inflation, it's also your standard of living. I've heard that a lot of people, as they spend more and more time in certain countries, they opt for more and more luxuries because they naturally see their buying power increase, and people feel wealthier. Even if they're not actually wealthier, they feel wealthier. So that's something to think about when it comes to being aware of inflation in the long term. Another factor of inflation that I think some travelers and expats don't really think about is the change in the value of the exchange rate. So I heard that at one time, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you could get 70 Philippine pesos for $1 US, but now it's more like about 50. And the pandemic situation has kind of reversed the trend, but I would not be surprised if 10 years from now you get maybe 45 pesos to the dollar. And that doesn't mean prices in the stores are decreasing, but rather that the exchange rate is declining, but prices are remaining the same. So things are getting more expensive. Even if you don't go to the store and see things increasing all the time, your buying power can decrease. And that's certainly exacerbated by a lot of the money printing of the last year in the U.S. And in the U.S., we've had a lot of fiscal stimulus policy. So as there's more and more money in the system, that money tends to have less and less value. It's not something that I like. It's not something that I enjoy, but it is the reality of the situation. And alongside that, we have to consider some factors that are in our favor as far as being travelers. And the main factor there is that, at least in the last year, the economies of many of these Southeast Asian countries have struggled naturally. Many of them rely heavily on tourism. In the case of Thailand, tourism is around 20% of the Thai economy in a typical year. And so with 20% fewer foreign dollars, and so with significantly fewer foreign dollars flowing into the country, it tends to cause the reverse to happen. So lately, in the last few months, we've seen a reversal where the dollar has actually strengthened against, say, the Philippine peso, against the Thai baht. At one point, it was down to $1 gets you 29 baht. I just checked this morning. It's like $1 gets you about 32.5 baht. Likewise, in the Philippines, I think it got down to $1 is getting you 47 Philippine pesos, whereas now it's closer to $1 getting you 50 Philippine pesos. So that is something to consider, is that when you have a dearth of tourism right now, when you have a lack of foreign currency entering these countries, then it does tend to weaken those currencies. And it's been really difficult on the people that live there because not just are they struggling with a lack of tourism dollars, a lack of people coming to spend money, And this is the case in areas where that's all they've got. Places like Palawan, places like Phuket, they're entirely reliant on tourism. They don't have a bunch of other industries that make money for the local population. And so it's not just the factor of a lack of tourism, but it's also any goods that are dollar denominated, like oil, become more and more expensive. As the exchange rate declines, then people in these other countries are having to spend more on oil. They're having to spend more on different kinds of things that you can only pay for in dollars. So how should you adjust to the rising costs in some of these countries, the higher inflation? Well, you want to be anticipating that. So if you make X amount of dollars, then maybe every year you try to earn a little bit more. I'm not going to put a percentage on that. This is not financial advice. This is just speculation. But let's say you earn $1,500 a month this year. Well, maybe next year you try to earn like $1,600 a month. And I know that sounds like little money, but in a lot of these countries, you can live decently on that amount. I'm not going to say you're going to live like a king or a queen on that amount, but you can live decent. And it's really up to you to come up with the income to do this, but understand that going over there with X amount of money and thinking that it's going to be fine for the rest of your life, that's not the case. These places are getting more popular. More and more people are finding out about them with the internet. Obviously, my channel is going to be popularizing certain destinations a bit more. Not quite the impact as much as some of the bigger travel channels, but certainly as people get to become more and more familiar with some of these other places, as life in the US becomes more and more expensive and frankly untenable in the long term for some people. I know for me, I can't imagine how expensive it's going to be here in several decades. So I'm certainly eyeing certain countries that I feel like are going to offer lower cost of living even in future years. But I'm planning to be making more money then. So having different kinds of side hustles, different kinds of investments, also, of course, a full-time job that I want to be working as long as I'm healthy. And so I have a kind of multi-tiered approach there, and you have to figure out what's right for you. But I don't want people to go to any of these places and think they're set because they have a $1,500 a month income or a $2,000 a month income. You need to make not just what you're spending every month, but you need to aim to increase that to deal with the cost of living, and you want to make more than that so that you can save extra money. You want to have money in case of an emergency situation. There's no telling what kind of situations you might find yourself in some of these countries. You're typically not going to be from these countries or have a lot of family there. And so you really have to be extra careful and be prepared to deal with different kinds of situations that can be quite costly and time consuming. And so having enough money, not just to pay for today or to pay for tomorrow, but being of the planning mindset to pay for several years from now, and even 10 years from now, and 15 years from now. So that's why I'm a fan of really doing a lot of planning. I talked about it in my last video. If that video was helpful, definitely give me a thumbs up. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support from all of you. Give us a comment and let us know what you think, because comments really help me to figure out what kind of content would be most helpful. So definitely comment down below. It helps me to know about the direction of the channel, the content that you want me to make. I know that one gentleman mentioned that he'd like for me to cover foreign income tax exemption, like basically FIEI, I believe is the correct phrase for that. And I'm not a financial advisor, so that video won't be financial advice. It's speculation, it's entertainment, but I'd like to discuss that if that's what would be helpful for some of you. It's something that I'm thinking about. Of course, I've been a little bit nervous. Of course, I've been a little bit nervous as far as trying to kind of make sure I don't give out financial advice, or I don't give you any ideas that could be detrimental to the future of your ability to travel. Of course, speak with a financial advisor before you come up with a long-term plan if that's something that you are concerned about, because this channel is just entertainment and speculation. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up, and I'll talk to you next time.